and ask the commissioners for rate increases or changes to their bills. And we're looking out for you, doing our best to keep your bills as low as possible. We recognize that here in Louisiana, we have some of the highest energy burdens, actually the highest energy burden, according to the Department of Energy. Louisiana has an energy burden, just simply means a portion, the percentage of our income, a huge percentage of our income is going to pay our utility bills. And so we show up and try and take provide expertise and expert witnesses into dockets to make sure that you are represented. We also show up in energy planning processes and advocate for things like energy efficiency and for your right to put solar on your rooftop. So next slide. Super. So the Louisiana Public Service Commission is broken down into these 5 districts. You are sitting in District 2 right now. And the Public Service Commissioner, who has been in that seat, decided not to run again. And so we have 3 candidates who are putting their name in the hat. District 2 obviously starts down here and runs up through part of Baton Rouge and up to West and East Feliciana. And it is a part of the state that it also has a lot of co-ops. So is anybody in the room represented by use utilities from a cooperative utility? Anybody use Entergy for your power? I see some hands. Oh, I'm seeing most hands. Most folks depend on Entergy. Anybody with no municipal utilities? Lafayette, Homa? No.
Some names of some co-ops.
Oh, good question. Some of the co-ops that represent this area are Slemco, and let's see, what else is in Demco is another one. Thank you. Yeah. Sleeka, thank you. Shout them out. There is a difference between cooperative, municipal, and investor-owned utilities. But the Louisiana Public Service Commission has a say about what goes into your bills, what the utilities profit if they are owned, and how high your utility bill might get depending on the rate. So let's see what else. Let's move forward. We're going to get into some of the responsibilities of the Public Service Commission. So one of the things I talked about, energy efficiency programs. This is a way that the Public Service Commission has to create energy savings. If you have ever heard of Entergy Solutions, has anybody heard of one of those programs, energy efficiency? I see another person. Yeah. Okay, so great. So hopefully that means that you've invested in things like insulation and weather stripping and the kinds of things that you can do to keep from wasting your energy, for example. So the commission has the authority to make decisions about programs and create programs like that for you. Can we go to the next one? The commission has say over what power choices utilities make. So if a utility says they want to build a new gas plant, for example, if the utility says they want to procure a bunch of solar power, the Public Service Commission makes the final decision about what power the utility procures on your behalf. Next one. Protect against storm costs. So you might know that the cost of major storms, named storms and not so named storms, pile up on our bills. And the Public Service Commission is in a position to review the costs, basically look over the receipts and make sure that the utilities aren't charging us for more than we're getting. This is incredibly important because, as you probably know, the costs of these storms are incredible. Just a couple of years ago, over the course of 18 months, one single utility racked up over $5 billion in storm costs. And we, as people who pay utility bills, are on the hook for those. So it's super important that the Public Service Commission and their staff look through those receipts and make sure that we're not paying for more than we should. And then finally, determine your bill cost, and that comes down to your rates. So when a utility wants to raise its rates because they want either a higher profit or they're not making enough revenue to cover their costs, they come to the Public Service Commission and they say, here's why we need to raise your rates. And then the commission and staff and anybody who intervenes, gets involved in those public proceedings, goes through the books and says, maybe yes, you need to raise them, maybe no, you don't. And in the end, it's really the Public Service Commission who makes the final decision. What the profit margin is, how those costs will be allocated across different kinds of customers, and finally, what those rates will be. And so while they don't determine exactly how much energy you use, obviously that's up to you and your thermostat probably, they do make the decisions about the total cost of the rate. So we will move that forward. So state of the rate, what are you currently paying for? We've talked about storm costs. Another thing that we talked about a bit is where your power comes from. You are paying for that power, meaning you're paying both for the power plant. Let's say if it's a gas-fired power plant or a nuclear power plant, you're paying over the life of that facility for it every month on your bill. The utility owns it, but you're paying for it. In addition to that, you pay for the fuel. So let's say the utility buys a number of gas power plants, and each month they have to then buy that gas on the open market, on the wholesale market, to power those plants. We then pay for the cost of that gas. So one of the things that that means in a place like Louisiana, where we use a significant portion of our power comes from gas-fired generation, is that when the cost of gas goes up and down, the cost of our bills go up and down. You might remember back in 2022, there was a pretty big spike in a lot of people's bills, very, very suddenly. And that was tied to a number of forces that was causing the cost of natural gas to triple and in some cases quadruple. And so that meant that folks really saw the impact, because so much of our power, over 75% of our power, is coming from gas. So just like you put gas in your car, and when that goes up, the trip down the block costs more, the same is true for power plants. And the commission makes decisions about that. Other things that are in your rate, things like environmental costs. So for example, the cost it takes to reduce emissions on power plants, that is a cost you're paying for. And like I said, energy efficiency programs and other things like
audio error. If Elena could unmute herself, sorry. Thank you.
Testing, can you hear? Okay.
Yes.
So those are the things that are going into your rate. So that stacks up to be an awful lot of things. I think we've reached the end of state of the rate. What is there? Our next slide there.
It is for us to introduce our candidates.
Okay, great.
So for folks who are just joining, thanks for coming on in. We have had a slight change of plans. We were calling an audible, as it were. So Julie Quinn, who is one of the 3 candidates running for District 2, she was rear-ended on her way over here. So she is not able to get a tire changed in time to make it here. Jean-Paul Coussan is on his way over. He is running late, but caught behind an accident. And so we are in a little bit of a holding pattern. Want to have y'all get the opportunity to hear from the candidates. That's why we're here. We're here to have a conversation. We started out, and we always have our candidate, Nick Laborde, here. Really grateful for that. What I'd like to do is take a moment and pause. We just did a brief introduction into the Public Service Commission, why it's relevant to us, why it matters. I would love to hear if y'all have any reactions to that, if you have any questions. Maybe would like to hear how you found yourselves here today, while we were just giving us maybe 5 or 10 minutes while we hold off for John Paul, and then we'll dive right in. So let me get some reactions. All right, well, how about my fellas here, our first ones here in the room today? What is y'all's reaction to our introduction to the Public Service Commission? Is that everything you already knew? So how did you find yourself here today? What made you come?
I hate being no good.
Who are you telling? Is there anybody else in this room that hates paying bills? What about you, sir?
One of the questions that you brought up was the issue with regards to solar energy.
Yeah.
And what role, if any, will the Public Service Commission have with parishes that will ban solar panels? Because I know in my neighboring parish, which is not in the same, pouring plans on them. And so does that fit within jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission, or will that be a part of the local government jurisdiction to make those decisions, although it is about?
Yeah, that's right. I want Logan to speak to that. Go ahead.
The answer to the question is the Public Service Commission has no jurisdiction in or in a municipality. If the parish says we don't want that facility built here, the commission, even though it's already approved that facility for the utility to build or procure the power from, they have no jurisdiction. So it's entirely up to them.
But the industry itself, solar, will be governed by the Public Service.
Logan, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to pause to make sure we have a lot of folks on Zoom. We have about 30 people on Zoom joining us as well. So I just want to make sure that they can hear the question. The question that was asked was whether the Public Service Commission has jurisdiction in parishes like St. James where there's a moratorium on solar. Logan's response to that question was that they do not have jurisdiction. The Public Service Commission does not have jurisdiction over those decisions. Logan, I'll let you continue on. Yeah, I think so. And also just repeating the question.
Sure, yeah. So the question from the room was, will the Public Service Commission have oversight of the solar industry? Is that the question? Yeah. As much as a utility asks to build or procure buy solar power, and the Public Service Commission can say yes or no, you can't procure that, you can't buy that. The Public Service Commission doesn't have any say over siting of that solar power, over necessarily the costs that solar developer charges. The only thing that the commission has jurisdiction over is how much that cost is passed on to customers. So for example, if the commission says, you're allowed to build that solar facility, but we're going to cap the cost at X, right? That means that if it still makes economic sense for the solar facility to be built, if the developer still wants to move forward, as long as they meet that cap, they can do that. So the commission is really an economic regulator, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Since our other two candidates are not here at the moment, I'd like to address Mr. Laborde. Which one of the other two candidates do you like the least?
In the hot seat.
I was gonna call a hold on that one.
Thank you. What I do earnestly tell people if I can ask a question seriously about that. I don't talk about it, I talk about it. And that's how I work in HR professionally. So I have conversations with folks who maybe don't want to talk with me or don't have the same alignment with me, but we have to sit at the same table sometimes to talk about things. Well, good. I'll ask you legitimate. The public energy companies, if they go to, when they go to the Public Service Commission and ask for an increase, how often does the Public Service Commission grant that increase?
Great question. So the question for those at home who couldn't hear, how often does the Public Service Commission make decisions about the utility's profit margin? Is that a fair? Yeah. So generally in Louisiana, we have what are called, and just gloss over this and I'll tell you what it means, what they call formula rate plans. Formula rate plan is a multi-year program. And so that means that effectively every 3 years, the utilities come in and ask for some change in that formula. And so right now we've just completed a formula rate plan update and change for both Entergy Louisiana and for CLECO. It'll be another 3 years before we start that back over again. Other, can we take questions if there are any on the Zoom?
Question, but I do believe the late Governor Kathleen Blanco, who started, so that it gave her a master's degree in.
It is.
All right, Emma, any questions in the Zoom chat? Let us know.
Not yet, but to all our Zoomies, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat.
That's great. All right. So I think what we'll do is let's give, because this is something I think that's really helpful, something that I learned as well coming into this work, is a little bit about the different types of utilities. And then we can jump into, I think, having our introduction of our candidate, and then we can start going through the questions. But this is something that I really found helpful. Something I didn't know is that there are 3 different types of utility setup. So the question in the beginning that Logan asked, which is, who is your energy provider? Are you provided by a co-op? Are you provided by Entergy? Are you provided by
An investor-owned
an
utility?
investor-owned utility? Exactly. And so I would just like for you, Logan, just to give us a little flavor of that so that we can understand across District 2 all the different ways that we are served electricity.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with municipal utility. It sounds like we didn't have anybody served by a muni in here, but I'll explain it anyway. A municipal utility is owned by the people of the place it serves. So that means the city of Lafayette, for example, Lafayette Utility Services, that is owned by the people. And so it is up to the decision makers who are on the city council, who happen to be on the power committee, who make the decisions about procurement, what kind of power is going to serve customers, and what the rates need to be to cover all the costs. But a municipal utility does not have a profit margin, right? So the power committee in the city of Lafayette isn't making decisions on any regular basis about what the profit margin is, because it is a not-for-profit. It is owned by the people. Does that make sense? Any questions about that one? Yeah, got a question.
Does that mean they lose?
No. So, I mean, I suppose they could if everyone moved out at once, sure. They can absolutely operate inefficiently. The thing to watch out with municipal utilities, and we've heard from some ratepayers in municipal utilities, that sometimes unless there are protections, the city, which is also has the power of the purse to run the various functions of a city, whether that's the roads or police or schools or whatever, might find itself needing additional funds to run those other things, maybe a zoo, for example. If those other things are drawing additional costs, sometimes the city council will decide to charge more on electric and gas or water utilities to pay for those other city amenities. This has been a problem, very frankly, in the city of Alexandria, where effectively about $11 million is charged on people's utility bills to cover things like the zoo and other local costs, sort of municipal costs. So I hope that helps answer your question.
So. I have 2. So.
No, it does not. Absolutely, it can be put back into the general fund. The other thing is that the city council could decide to reduce those rates and not create basically an ATM to pay for other city services from its local utility. As I understand it, Lafayette is pretty good about that and doesn't do a lot of those inter-office transfers in the way that Alexandria does. But it is really up to the elected officials in that parish or city to make those decisions. And there are a number of these municipal utilities, very small ones, actually. I think Morgan City has a muni, among others. So it's not just Lafayette and Alexandria. Municipal utilities, very good point, and that's why I started here, are not regulated by the Public Service Commission because they are effectively overseen by their city councils. Yeah. So we've got municipal utilities. I'm going to talk about co-op utilities. So cooperative utilities actually go back to the 1920s and 30s. The rural parts of our country were the last ones to get electricity to their homes, largely because the cost of stringing the lines, it was prohibitively expensive. And so folks out in rural counties and parishes, farmers and folks who worked in industry were some of the last ones to get electricity. And so way back then, the federal government said, we're going to invest in this because we recognize that electricity is a public service and everyone needs to have access to it. And so there was a federal investment in rural electric co-ops. But the difference between a co-op and a muni, or a co-op and an investor-owned utility, is the cooperative is owned by its members. So if you are a member, you have a say about what happens with the direction of the utility itself. And you also, if there's a surplus, let's say, you can get that back on your utility bill. So it is also a not-for-profit structure. It is also, therefore, it doesn't profit seek. So the goal is enough revenue to cover the costs, and that's it. And then there's investor-owned. Sorry, did you have a question about co-ops?
Well, it's kind of about co-op, but I'm gonna back up to municipal
Sure.
just for a minute. I think that Lafayette is one of the, maybe the only municipal government utility here in the state.
There are a handful of others, yeah. There's the city of Alexandria.
Question.
Oh, sure, sorry about that. For those of you at home, the question was, are there other, apart from the city of Lafayette, municipal utilities in the state? And the answer is absolutely. I think there are 13 or 14 of them. It includes City of Alexandria, Ruston, Morgan City, among a handful of others. And so, what's that? Home and Thibodeau. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that wasn't the end of the question. Question is, out of the governing that they do over the city, and they also overseeing the utilities, this is a curiosity question, do they get paid more?
Do they get paid more? Is it the people who work for it? Or the
city council people, do they get paid more for overseeing the
Oh.
utilities and having a say in the utilities besides their city council job?
That's a great question, and not one I know the answer to be very frank. Yeah, and then we're gonna move on. They're not government owned. They are owned by their members. I'm sorry,
Are they regulated?
regulated. They are regulated by the Public Service Commission. Yes, they are. And then, yep, last one, and then we move on.
Which is regulated?
The two that are regulated by the Public Service Commission that are the investor-owned utilities and the electric co-ops. Yeah. So the last one is investor-owned utilities. That is Entergy, Cleco, SWEPCO. Those are the three in our state. Investor-owned utilities are based on an idea of earning a profit. They are often stocks that you can also buy on the market. And they are, they serve most people, both in the state of Louisiana and nationally. Most people in the country get their power from an investor-owned utility. And so the biggest difference among the three is really that the investor-owned utilities have especially in the state of Louisiana, have an economic regulator in the Louisiana Public Service Commission who puts a limit on how much they can profit. There you go.
That's why we're here.
I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then I think we should probably.
Yeah, let's take a couple of the Zoom questions, and then we'll move on and get into our candidate Q&A. One of the questions that I see here is, are rising costs of water and sewage rates PSC matters? What's up with higher rates?
That entirely depends on where you are. So most of our water systems in the state of Louisiana are not privately owned, sorry, are municipally owned. So owned by either the parish or the city themselves. Increasingly, there is an effort to what they call privatize them or turn them into investor-owned entities that would then have a profit motive. And I know that there are a handful of those kind of questions going on right now. They're what we call dockets, where the Public Service Commission would make a decision about whether something could become investor-owned and therefore regulated by them. And so that's one of the things that drives up the cost very often of a water and sewerage system if it becomes privatized.
All right, and our last question is, please explain how the Louisiana Public Service Commission works with state government to set policy.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. So, unlike most states, the Public Service Commission, the regulator, is constitutionally empowered to make decisions about utilities. That means that the legislature and the governor are not in a position to tell the Public Service Commission how to structure policy, make decisions about profits, about utilities, any of those things. In many states, those things are either directed by the legislature or the governor, and the Public Service Commission then implements policy that's created elsewhere. Here in Louisiana, it's an incredible amount of power that these 5 elected individuals have to make these decisions effectively on your behalf. And so only recently have there been reasons for the Louisiana legislature to weigh in on law and policy to impact the Public Service Commission. One thing that the legislature did a number of years ago was direct the Public Service Commission to create a mechanism for you to put solar on your rooftop and receive a credit for it on your utility bill. That policy is up to the commission to develop and implement what that credit looks like, but the legislature told the commission, requested that the commission create a policy to begin with. Other things that the legislature has done is create what they call a, oh boy, I never remember this acronym. It's LURC. Can you give me LURC? Louisiana Utility Recovery Corporation. Thank you. Louisiana Utility Recovery Corporation. I had to phone a friend for that one. That is an entity that was created post-Hurricane Katrina and Rita, hurricanes Katrina and Rita, when the storm costs were so enormous that for a regular utility to manage those costs on utility bills was just going to be difficult, in fact, impossible. You can come have a seat right here. Welcome. So the Louisiana legislature created this LURC in order to allow utilities to securitize storm debt so that they could reduce the costs of those storms on our bills. So that's one of the very few things that the legislature has sort of oversight of for the commission. Truly, the commission has an enormous amount of power and is going to make the decisions about your bills. I'm going to hand it back over to Elena, since we have our candidates here, and let you run the show.
That sounds great. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. So for folks who are just joining on Zoom, I will just reiterate one last time. We had a little bit of an audible here. One of our candidates, Julie Quinn, got into a car accident on her way over here. Another one of our candidates has just arrived, John Paul Coussan. He was also caught behind an accident. And so we are rocking and rolling now. We were just doing a little Q&A, learning a little bit more about our electricity system. And so what I'll do now is I will ask my colleague Jessica, who is always doing the work of the people at the Public Service Commission, to give each of our candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves. Jessica? Maybe you, I'll pass this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm going to change it.
Got it. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Hendricks. I'm the State Policy Director at the Alliance for Affordable Energy. So I'm very invested in this election because it's going to be the person that we are working with for the next 6 years on all of our policies. So this is really exciting. What I wanted to do now is give the candidates an opportunity to introduce yourself. You each have 1 minute. Jackson Voss is going to be timekeeper right here throughout the entire forum. So we'll have 1 minute to do introductions, and then we'll dive into the questions, and then we'll have 2 minutes at the end for closing remarks. So You wanted to start?
Can you give me the?
Okay, well, I'll talk fast. But you did pronounce my name correctly. My name is Jean-Paul Coussan. I'm from Lafayette. Thank you for having me down here. And I don't think it was Julie's wreck that I was behind. It was a different one, but we were coming from different areas. First and foremost, there's many people in this audience, including our hosts, that know a lot more about some of these areas than I do. And when, as a legislator, we come and talk to, whether it's judges, district attorneys, whether it's business people, we're talking to them as legislators dealing with policy, but we're here to learn from our constituents to find out what the policies are that are the best for the state of Louisiana to move us forward. So I'm here working for the PSC race. I'm currently a senator for Lafayette. The modern American economy depends upon affordable energy. And that is the crux of the issue. And I'm here to ask you for your vote. The race covers Terrebonne and Lafourche Parish, and I'm looking forward to all of our questions here tonight.
Hey y'all, my name is Nick Laborde, and this is my first time running for office. I was born in Ville Platte, Louisiana, which is not in the district, but that does make me Cajun born by birth. Nobody can take that away from me. I grew up in Marksville, Louisiana, as the son of a mayor, John Ed Laborde, who's also the crawfish bread man for Gas Fest, if y'all ever been there. But what people don't know is he was a mayor. He turned the volunteer fire department in the town into a full-time fire department growing up. When you tell that story, he'd be so proud. And it gets better because my great-grandfather, his grandfather, started that volunteer department. So that's how I got to grow up seeing politics, solving problems and helping people. And that's why I'm interested in this race. That's why I'm interested in just helping folks solve problems and making races more borders in Louisiana up and down.
Thank you both. And thank you both for attending and engaging with the constituents. I will turn it back over to Elena to dive into some questions.
Sounds good. Go. Thanks, Jessica. I do just want to point out here, so we have some folks in the room and we also have some folks on Zoom. And so we have about, we have 30 folks on Zoom. There are a wide range of organizations, that are represented here today. So lots of different groups, starting with us. We are here to make sure that your bills are affordable. There are business interests here. There are renewable interests here. There are voting interests here. There are regular people here who got a mailer and was like, I want to know who is running for office. And so we represent a really broad, diverse group of interests across the parishes. Just wanted to note that it is not only us here in the room, but those in the virtual space as well. And so we are going to turn now into our short answer Q&A. So I want to lay out the rules of engagement here. So this is not any sort of catch you, we want to get you sort of thing. We, in advance of this meeting, did have one-on-ones with each of the candidates, discuss some of what our priorities are, and basically just laid out that we want a relationship. And so the questions that we're going over today, like I said, have already been put out there into the world, have been seen. There is no gotcha. So each candidate, there are 9 questions in this section. 1-minute responses will be allowed. Each candidate has the opportunity for 1 30-second rebuttal. As with any candidate forum, we want to maintain respect for each other and respect for our time here today. So our timekeeper, Jackson Voss, will be present to make sure that we stay on track. And he will ring my lovely family Christmas bell when it is time to move on. So starting with our first question, this is on the topic of energy efficiency. So in January of 2024, the Louisiana Public Service Commission passed an energy efficiency rule that would take the program out of the hands of the utility companies that profit from higher energy use. The rule also eliminated lost contribution to fixed costs, which basically allowed the utility companies to recover costs for electricity that they never sold to us and that we never used. If you're elected, what energy efficiency investments will you prioritize? And I will start with you, Nick, and then we'll move on to Jean-Paul.
Great, thank you. So I support the efficiency program that was passed. And I want to do more with community weatherization programs. You know, the PSC's taken on more of that role in recent years. And I'd also like to see Louisiana embrace a federal program called Inclusive Utility Investment. I don't know everything about it, but there is a huge focus on energy efficiency. And several states in the South have embraced this. Louisiana has not done it yet. So I think that's another great opportunity for us. And when you do that program, they do also let utilities still make a good bit of money. So we're not going to hurt their profit margins.
Thank you. Well, as with any of these questions, you know, I know they're not gotcha, but I'm sure the commission had weeks and months of study and staff to kind of look at these votes before they were taken. So I trust that the votes that were taken were made with a deep understanding of the issues at hand. We all want to be more efficient. We all want to be able to utilize our technology that's at hand. Technology is changing every day, from the industrial solar panels to the residential solar panels on our roofs, to the wires and the transmission and the distribution lines. We want to be more efficient. We do need to utilize the federal grants. We have amazing contractors in the state of Louisiana that are basically taking care of some of these programs to bring our houses and make our houses more efficient. I think we should continue to take advantage of the technology changes and be nimble as a public service commission, while at the same time looking at public policy as something that you can't change on a dime, because people are trying to make investments individually, businesses are trying to make investments into the state. And so we don't want to be changing public policy every week, every month without a deep understanding of how that could impact our energy industry. But I do support energy efficiency in general, particularly for individuals who are looking to reduce their charges on a monthly basis.
Thank you for those responses. Moving on to our second question. This is about the Bayou Power Station. This is a proposal for a floating gas barge in Leeville, Louisiana. Entergy filed an application for a 112 megawatt gas-fired power station that floats on a barge. It'll cost ratepayers $411 million and mostly service industrial customers. While the project is currently on hold, do you think proposals like these would benefit customers? If so, how do you intend to mitigate bill increases to residents? This time we'll start with Jean-Paul and then move on to Nick.
As we know, the industrial expansion is going at a lightning rate right now, and that includes Port Coussan. The Port Coussan Commission is doing a deep dive into these needs right now. There was a recent removal, of course, by natural disaster. Ida took out so many of our distribution and transmission lines all the way down to Grand Isle, and now we have less actual distribution and transmission lines than before. So now we're in a situation where we've got growth in the LNG sector, we've got growth in the oil and gas sector. We're about to have a booming offshore production for the next decade, and everybody's talking about that right now, up and down the bayou and across the state. Even in Lafayette, we're hearing about it. So we have an issue with power. We need more of it. We need it to be delivered to the port. We need to get it down there, and we got to figure out the best and most efficient and affordable way to do that without affecting the ratepayer. And to the extent that it does affect the ratepayer, then we have to go back to the industry and we have to go back to the electric companies and find out whether or not they're trying to make too big of a profit off of this, and whether or not it's worth it for our community to incur that cost. So it's actually a major issue, obviously, not just the dollar cost, but from the standpoint of growing Louisiana, we are trying to attract jobs, and that's part of it. Thank you.
I'm going to say, based on the information I have, no, I do not support that power station, because Jean-Paul mentioned a little bit about transmission capacity. And right now we're trying to make a long story short, win the fight at MISO and get greater prioritization for transmission infrastructure in Louisiana. Most people don't know about this. And the way that we get that prioritization is we invest in clean and renewable energy, so that they show we're embracing the future and planning for what's coming. So no, I would not support that power station. I think we're at a point where we need to replace a lot of old generation with clean energy because of the cost savings to ratepayers. And if we can create new projects that are clean energy as well, I think it's
Thank you for your responses. This is in line with the generation question. So this question is about replacing old generation. So Grand Gulf Nuclear Station is a notoriously unreliable reactor that has suffered numerous safety and operational issues since starting its operations in '82. Ultimately, it's cost ratepayers billions of dollars in unjustifiable costs. How do you think we should replace the generation capacity of the Grand Gulf nuclear facility? Starting with you, Jean-Paul.
Well, to the extent that it does need to be replaced, I do believe that we should utilize our natural resources. We have an abundant supply of natural gas in the state of Louisiana. It's cheap, it's affordable, it's abundant, and we have our own oil and gas workers right here locally that we can put to work to deliver on that supply of natural gas. In addition to that, we've got all the renewables at our disposal to the extent that the market can dictate that they're economical. But the renewables are more, like you said, as far as the reliability is concerned, from the standpoint of the renewables, they're so beneficial for the intermittent power issues. But the natural gas is more stable over the long term, and then we can use the renewables to kind of hedge on the prices against the fluctuating natural gas. So I believe that there's a general mix, and in addition to that, we should also look at other nuclear options that may become more affordable and more efficient and be brought to market as soon as they can.
Can I issue one rebuttal?
Yes, one rebuttal.
There's a commercial airing right now where someone is decrying all aspects of renewable energy. So not really a rebuttal, but a statement I wanted to state.
And your response, 1 minute. Again, the question is, how do you think we should replace the generation capacity of the Grand Gulf nuclear facility?
We need to continue to expand our grid with options in the clean and renewable energy. Grand Gulf, if you don't know the history, earned the nickname of Grand Goof because they spent so much money on it building it. It is the least reliable nuclear reactor in the United States. And the Alliance can correct me if I'm wrong, but most of that power tends to go to Energy New Orleans and not Energy Louisiana. So throughout Louisiana, we often don't see the impact of it, but in New Orleans, it has been a big deal. There was a settlement with the commission, I believe earlier this year or late last year, where there was a years-long lawsuit, multiple states involved. So I'm not opposed to nuclear power, but I don't think replacing Grand Gulf with more nuclear would be a good decision. We need to continue diversifying our energy sources away from that natural gas infrastructure because we're so sensitive to all of the price fluctuations in it, as we all felt in 2022, as the kind folks from the Alliance were talking about before we started the forum here. Yeah, so we just need to diversify so we're not reliant while also improving the natural gas infrastructure, because we heard stories after Francine where folks couldn't run generators because the pressure wasn't there. I got the bill.
All right, moving on to deregulation and restructuring. This is a really prominent question at the commission right now. Many customers, both residential and commercial, want choices for their electricity. I heard many of you mention different options for solar, for example. Folks want the opportunity to choose where their electricity comes from, including from clean sources. Louisiana residents and businesses are expressing a desire to have more options for that electricity, including through self-generation and net metering. As a commissioner, would you support consumer choice for electric utilities? And if so, what consumer protections will you prioritize? Starting with you, Nick.
So I love this question because the first thing I learned in this very early education of utilities is it's kind of backwards. So we hear deregulation and we think, oh, we're loosening the rules and it's the Wild West. Well, all the rules are made for Entergy and the monopolies and these big utility companies, and it needs to apply more to you and me. So we need to open up the energy market a little bit so we have greater options to get power in times when there's great grid load, maybe before a hurricane, during a summer where we have horrible drought like last year. I'm opposed to a Texas model because Texas kind of opened everything up and got rid of their consumer protection board, which is the big flaw in their model. So direct answer, yes, I support opening up more of our energy market so that individual customers, industrial customers can get their power from different areas and not have to deal with Entergy as much. But I'm only in support of that if we have strong consumer protections, that you don't have a scenario where you have sketchy contractors going door to door after a hurricane. We don't want that happening with electric companies.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, yep. So this is a question about deregulation. As a commissioner, would you support consumer choice for electric utilities? If so, what consumer protections will you prioritize?
So we do have some consumer choice, and we have a partially regulated utility, and the regulated side of things helps our community down here get back up on, up and our power back up after these storms come. Because had we been in a truly Texas model, then these systems could fail. And the companies that normally send in the trucks and the maintenance and all the utility workers that come in to help us, they might say, well, we're not going to do that this time. We're going to let that utility fail on you, and we're going to come in and replace them. Louisiana doesn't allow that. So we have a regulated utility that gives the opportunity for the companies that are in a geographic area to make a profit, which means that they know that they're somewhat protected, and therefore they can incentivize other helpers, other workers, other companies to come in and get you back up online as quickly as possible. So that is the benefit of having a partially regulated utility, which Louisiana, being vulnerable to natural disasters, is sometimes better suited in that situation. But there are ways that we can incentivize some more competition and to give more consumers choice about what they're using in their own households.
Great, thank you. Just one clarifying point, and I want to make sure I'm spot on here, but so if we think of Texas as total deregulation, Louisiana is on the opposite end of the spectrum, where we are totally regulated. And so full spectrum, part of what the Alliance, just to emphasize, we have not taken a position on restructuring or deregulation, but what we do support is protections for consumers so that we do not get into a situation like Texas was in. So
Is Texas fully deregulated?
Texas is fully deregulated.
Fully
So one set, yep, and then we're
So
fully regulated.
Regulated from the distribution, transmission, and power generation. Thank you.
All right, so something that both candidates have touched on here is this need for transmission. So in order to reach the levels of renewable and affordable energy that we need to meet energy demands, we need to continue transmission planning and expansion. A well-planned electric grid can bring consumers access to cheaper energy and to cleaner energy. It also helps our grid to be more resilient and reliable when it comes to hurricanes and storms. Transmission expansion, not only that, but it could help deliver 200,000 jobs to our region, utility bill savings, and enough renewable energy to power 12 million homes. This is based on evidence from other states. So if elected, what will you do as a commissioner to reduce the barriers to transmission expansion? Starting with you, Nick, and then we'll move to John Paul.
Yes, well, the good news is I did kind of cover this in my other answers. I think we need to win the fight at MISO in order to get that prioritization for Louisiana to have greater transmission capacity. And it's a bit of a chicken and the egg issue because they're going to do that investment when they see us investing in the future with clean energy. And that's how it's been in many other states. Louisiana has this opportunity to get that transmission infrastructure, which will benefit everyone, even the customers who are not using clean energy. So we need to win the fight at MISO, and then also we can make energy pay more with the power of a 3-2 commission. I mean, this determines the direction of the commission, and we can help make better decisions for ratepayers.
I think we need to be careful and make sound decisions based upon a complete review of all of Louisiana's assets and personal property rights, because we have our oil and gas infrastructure, our pipelines, our property rights, and the servitudes and rights of ways and that we will be dealing with relative to the transmission infrastructure could all be impacted by personal property rights and our valuable pipeline infrastructure. So while we do need more capacity for our transmission and more access to the MISO grid, I think we just need to take a step-by-step approach and make sure that we're doing it without interfering with other aspects of our Louisiana culture, our economics, and our property rights.
Right, I just want to show a quick graphic that shows the energy system that we're a part of. So when we talk about transmission, that you see how we have a little hold up here between Arkansas and other states in the Midwest. If that holdup wasn't there, we would be able to get the electricity that comes from the north. That electricity is cheaper, that electricity is cleaner. We can't get that because of that traffic jam that is right there. That traffic jam is an intentional traffic jam that the Alliance is working to encourage some movement along that. So when we talk about transmission, what we're really saying is we want to connect all parts of the system so that everybody can benefit from the cheaper, cleaner energy. All right, moving on to the next question. This question is about diversifying the fuel mix. So here in Louisiana, 76% of our fuel comes from natural gas. At a time when natural gas prices are extremely volatile, we need stability and fuel diversity. So far this year, increased volatility has occurred even as the prices of natural gas have fallen to record lows. And so if elected, what will you do to diversify our fuel mix to ensure price and energy stability? Starting with you, Jean-Paul, and then moving on to Nick.
Well, I think your question kind of answers itself. We do have a diversified fuel mix. We do have fluctuating prices in many of the feedstocks for the power. And I believe companies, and there are examples throughout the state that are hedging some of these different fuels against one another. We also had coal, which is still being used in the state of Louisiana. And relative to all of the different fuel mixes, I think the price would be a lot more stable with natural gas, with coal, even with solar, without so much federal interference and federal overreach from the government dealing with all of these different resources. And so, but for the federal government's involvement, we would have a lot more stability across the board, and we would have the most affordable opportunities for our citizens, which I don't think are being afforded to them because of the federal overreach. So I believe that we do have a good mix. I think we do need to rely upon what we have in Louisiana on the ground and under our ground, and we need to be able to use the workers that we have here to deliver it to us affordably.
Well, I think my answer to this one is already pretty well known. I think we need to invest in clean and renewable energy. And I wanted to just take a moment because I'm going to use my minute like a good politician. So I work in HR, and I have dealt a lot with workforces that change, reskilling and transferring skills and moving people to different jobs, different parts of the business. And something I'm very passionate about is making sure everyone has a place. And something that I'm very interested in, and I don't know the overlap between the PSC versus legislature, workforce development, how all that stuff works together. But I want to make sure that as we embrace this clean energy future in Louisiana, can get those prioritizations to really have a sustainable future. I want to make sure that the folks in our legacy fossil fuel industries have an opportunity in this new future. So many folks who work in coal plants or gas-fired plants have skills that are transferable with some retraining programs that could move them into a solar industry. So it's not like we're going to be flipping anything off. No one is that powerful, and that transition can't come that quick. But I'm very interested in that, and I think that would be a critical component of embracing clean energy.
All right, this question is related to clean energy. It's about community solar. Community solar is a way for residential customers like you and I to access bill savings and clean energy from solar panels without having to actually put those panels on the roof or buy them ourselves. It's a great way for renters and people who can't afford solar panels to benefit from 20% cost savings or more that comes from this program. There are many ways to incentivize this community solar and make it accessible to residents across the state. Right now, it is currently only available to residents in the city of New Orleans. So right now, there are federal dollars headed to Louisiana for community solar specifically. How, as a commissioner, would you take advantage of that money? Starting with Nick, and then we'll move to JP. Jean-Paul, excuse me. Okay, noted.
I think we got to embrace it. I mean, I know I'm saying the same thing every question. I mean, you guys, everyone can go home and stop listening to me now. You know what I'm going to say. But I love the idea of community solar, and JP says something that I agree with, and it's that, we have industries that are very culturally important in Louisiana, like sugarcane. And I don't think the solar farm model really makes sense in our state. There's one in West Baton Rouge Parish that's just overgrown, and it's an eyesore. And I don't know how efficient those panels are if the weeds are twice as tall as the panel. So if we can put the solar installations in a place that makes sense, that's where I support it the most. we should put it in parking lots and create the shady spot, right? Like, you know how now we're in October, we got the, shady spot at the back. We don't park that far anymore, but in August, the shady spot is like the spot. Let's put panels in parking lots, generate some energy off of all that asphalt that's just taking in sun. And let's create more shade spots in the parking lot. I mean, there's so many ways we can get creative here, and community solar can go so many ways. So I support it, cluster it in a way that makes sense, largely through rooftop or creative solutions like parking lots. And we just need to start embracing this because it's common and many other states are getting benefits that we can.
Your question had a couple of terms in there, and I want to make clear that when we talk about federal dollars, when we talk about grants, when we talk about tax credits, we're talking about your tax dollars. We're talking about money that we've all paid in our taxes to give to the federal government, and now they are sending it back. So this is your money. This is the taxpayer dollar. What is the best way to spend the taxpayer dollar? There are homegrown solar companies in the state of Louisiana that we want to succeed. Some of them are economical and profitable without the tax credits, without the subsidies, without the programs. And so how are they doing that? I think we need to do a deep dive into it, how they're making it affordable to their customers, how are they allowing and their customers to essentially make it worth their while to invest in these systems. I think we need to look at that relative to the money that is coming in. I think we just need to be the best stewards of possible as a government, as a elected official before we give any money away to any programs that might not be sustainable over time. So we really need to look at that before we choose which program that they should be invested in.
All right, next question. This is a question that is very important to me personally. This is about public engagement and democracy. So when you go to a commission meeting, what you will see is a lot of men in suits. You probably won't know what's going on. It'll be really hard to engage unless you have been to a commission meeting before, or you're sitting next to somebody who knows what's going on. And so this is the same as, many of us have seen in the legislature as well. After traveling sometimes to Baton Rouge from other parts of the state, you might find that the item that you want to speak on at the meeting is no longer on the agenda. This is not conducive for public participation whatsoever. And so if you are elected, what will you do as a commissioner to ensure greater transparency at the Public Service Commission and make sure that meetings are just frankly more accessible to regular people? Starting with you, Jean-Paul, and then moving on to Nick.
I will take your advice. And I will listen intently on what you're advising that we can do to make it more accessible and more friendly to the public. And that's my commitment.
Accepted.
Oh man, I love this question. All right, so about 2.5 years ago, when the natural gas prices went crazy and the bills went insane, I loaded up this little app that everybody been talking about called TikTok, and everybody was using it for 10-second videos where you go, haha, and scroll through. And I said, let's make a 3-minute video about making sure you're registered to vote, how to find your public service commissioner, how to write a letter to him, and how to, try to get them to help you with your bill. And that got a lot of success. It got over like 200,000 views. I think Commissioner Green's office kind of indirectly responded to it. The New Orleans City Council, JP Morrell, quoted my video word for word and how to write a letter to your officials. So like I do in my work in HR, I create learning and development and training like I've done before. And now on the campaign trail, education is a huge component. I want to update the PSC website, which looks like it's from 1985. I'm very sorry for anyone who's worked on it. If you hear, I'm very sorry. Create an interactive map of the district. It's so hard to find if you're in it real quickly. Promote the live stream and make sure we can use the seat as a platform to educate and make people know that this is the most important elected body that no one knows about. Change that.
All right, folks, this is our last. Yep.
I would like to follow up, and I'll sort of rebuttal or not, but
go ahead.
And those are I think noble goals. In the legislature after COVID, I think we all recognize the technological deficiencies that we had at the legislature. And we have passed bills for the last 3 years that has made the legislature more accessible, more video capable, and then invested in technology. And I think that's where Nick and I probably agree. Right now, Louisiana has a Go Vote app. It's an award-winning app. It's incredible. If y'all should download it if you don't have it. It's something that the Secretary of State is very proud of, Nancy Landry. And so relative to the Public Service Commission, I think we can do a deep dive into those types of advancements that we can make to make it more accessible to the citizens.
Yeah, that's right. So our job, we are looking out for regular folks. Regular folks, hard to make decisions when you don't understand what is being talked about. That's speaking from my own personal experience on these matters. So our last question here.
Also heard that some people don't wear suits. Is that true?
Maybe us, maybe me, maybe I'm the one not in a suit. All right, last question here and our short answer, and then we'll move on to our rapid fire. So this is about a disconnection crisis. Louisianians are facing a disconnection crisis due to extreme heat. Customers aren't currently protected from shutoffs during extreme heat under the current rules at the commission. The Alliance receives calls weekly from folks and individuals requesting utility bill assistance, coupled with the fact that Louisiana is the most energy insecure place in the country. 51 out of 50. Y'all, there are only 50 states. They included DC in that, and we're still 51. And we have so much energy production in the state. So the fact that we have the most insecure energy situation and people are getting cut off during these times of during heat crises, what would you do as a commissioner? Do you support protections for residents from having their power disconnected during extreme heat? I'll start with you, Nick, and then we'll move to Jean-Paul.
Yes, I'd like to ban disconnections in the state of Louisiana. Now, no state has done a blanket disconnection ban. Every state has protected classes of people. I think we're one of the few states that there's extreme heat provisions over a certain temperature or under a certain temperature. But the states who have banned disconnection for protected classes, like folks who are on fixed income, retired, elderly, all their utility companies are doing just fine. So I'd really like to do that. On top of that, we can create forgiveness programs for low-income folks that are struggling to pay those bills and create actual sustainable payment plans so that, you know, if you can't make a $400 utility bill and you're 3 months late, you can't just expect that person to pay a $1,200 utility bill if they couldn't make the $400. You need real help for folks.
I think we can look at this question from a couple different perspectives, but number one, recently there was a rate case that ultimately, I think it was a unanimous decision to eliminate connection fees, reduce late fees. I think those were the right decision to be made at that time. I think that was good policy. I think what you're talking about is a furtherance of that sort of goal to protect the ratepayer, protect the consumer, particularly someone in a very vulnerable situation. But the broader question is relative to the hardening of the grid and the intermittent power that might be lacking in the times that the power is being shut off. So I think there's some underlying causes there that we can really take a deep dive into and figure out why there's lapses in the power and whether or not the hardening of the grid can take care of some of that, and then who bears the risk of the hardening, you know, and that's a much broader question. So I think it's something that is a worthwhile goal to look at trying to eliminate or reduce the need for those cutoffs. But I think it's a much broader question than just let's ban it. I think there's a lot of other things that we can look at that moves in the right direction, but that could help the entire grid.
Thank you all for your responses. We are now moving into the rapid fire engagement section. This is 6 questions, yes or no responses only, please. Question number 1, would you support a change in LPSC rules or state law to limit or restrict donations from regulated entities to candidates for the LPSC? This would be, for example, not accepting donations from the utility companies that are regulated by commissioners. Do you support this, yes or no? Nick, and then we'll move to Jean-Paul.
Yes.
No.
Question 2, do you believe prison phone rates should be substantially reduced? Starting with you, Jean-Paul.
You use a term like substantially, so I don't agree with that term. And in talking to the sheriffs, I think that would be a major cause of concern.
Yes or no?
I answered.
Yes.
Will you uphold the commission's prior energy efficiency ruling that customers are not required to pay for the electricity that the utility company didn't sell and that customers didn't use? Starting with you, Nick, and then Jean Paul.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to research it. I need to know about the actual vote and what went into the vote and why they did it at that time. I don't know the answer at this time.
Question 4, in your opinion, do you think nuclear qualifies as a clean energy under a renewable portfolio standard? Starting with you, Jean Paul, and then Nick.
Yes,
Yes.
Will you be a champion for transmission planning and expansion so that consumers can get cheaper and cleaner energy? Starting with you, Jean Paul.
yes,
Yes.
Will you communicate? This is an important one. I just want to emphasize that this is an extremely important one. Will you communicate with your fellow commissioners and office staff to address the needs of Louisiana residents? Starting with you, Nick, and then Jean Paul.
Yes.
absolutely.
All right, folks. So what we'll do now is I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica. Each of our candidates will have an opportunity to make a closing statement. I know that we have some questions in the chat. I want to give folks an opportunity to have those questions be asked since we have a little bit of extra time. So what we'll do now, we'll turn it over to closing statements and then we'll field questions from the audience. Does that work for everybody? Cool. All right, on to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Elena, for facilitating those questions. And thank you, candidates, for your clear answers. I think that was very informative for us. And now what we'd like to do is a 2-minute closing statement. So you will each have 2 minutes to kind of give your closing remarks, any last minute things that you wanted to clarify from answers and or kind of plans for your candidacy and or your commissionship. Yes. We'll start with Jean Paul.
So as I mentioned earlier, just hearing these questions, we learn about the issues that the Public Service Commission has been facing. And some of those issues are deep dives into the regulatory world. But down here in Terrebonne and Lafourche Parish, we know exactly what we've been dealing with. We've been dealing with storms. We've been dealing with resiliency. We've been dealing without power for days and weeks at a time. We also are looking for jobs. And I'm going to stay committed to ensuring that Louisiana has affordable energy produced by our local energy workers. And I believe that's going to be consistent for the foreseeable future. And as I've said many times, we have the renewables in the mix, and we also have the market that's going to be allowing those renewables to be a part of our energy makeup. And Louisiana should be able to look at all of those options and determine which one brings the most affordable, reliable energy in the face of storms for our people. And I think that's the key. It is in some senses, it will be a deep dive. In others, it's going to be common sense. And so I look forward to being a common sense public service commissioner. I do look forward to working with my fellow public service commissioners. We all have different constituencies. I'm proud to be from the Acadiana and having lived in Baton Rouge for 7 years, and then having the connection with the Bayou region with our energy industry. I believe that those 3 regions really can work together to deliver affordable energy for the state of Louisiana.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Nick, you get your 2 minutes.
Something I like to say to folks when I'm going to an event or on the campaign trail is I'm Louisiana through and through. You got the first part of the bio at the beginning. I went to UL. I got 2 degrees from UL, and I don't get to say this very often because I live in Baton Rouge on that side of the river. Go Cajuns. I got to take every opportunity I can. I spent 6 of the best years of my life in Lafayette. It's a wonderful place, John Paul, one of the greatest cities in the state. Love Cajun country. And look, I was born in Ville Platte. I grew up in Marksville, went to college at UL. I've researched that you go to the Baton Rouge Library on Goodwood and they have the archives. If you go to East Baton Rouge Parish, they have great genealogy. I looked up the Laborde family tree, and 300 years ago, the Labordes landed in Point Coupee. I don't know why they went past New Orleans and went up to Point Coupee, but you know what? I'm glad they did, because I'm here today. My family's been in this state for generations. I care deeply about this state. I am the youngest one in the race at 30 years old, but I want to see my friends stop leaving Louisiana. I want to see more opportunities for our young people. I want to see more opportunities for our existing energies, and I want to see industries. And I want to see our state not get left behind as we're at this critical junction point. This seat will determine the direction of the Public Service Commission. And I'm the only candidate in the race not taking utility donations. My financial report isn't very pretty, but I think I've got the message. I'm asking for your vote, and I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you both. That was very informative. I will turn it back to Elena to do some online questions and questions from the audience, since it looks like we're pretty good on time, which is surprising.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So just before we jump into audience questions, I do just want to say, we have wrapped up our official segment of the evening. So if you are pressed on time or you got to jump, please do feel free. It's kind of a flow, come and go right now. But if you'd like to stay, hang tight. We're going to field some questions from folks in the room. And again, we have 30 folks on Zoom right now. We have some questions in the chat. So hang tight if you're able. We will wrap up in less than 15 minutes and be sure to get you out of here on time. So starting with one of the first questions that we have, and we'll adhere to the same sort of timing rules of the 1 minute, so we give each candidate an opportunity to respond. This question comes from the Zoom chat. Louisiana has vast energy knowledge and energy base. We have, energy diversification can help bring additional jobs to the state. What will you do to help diversify our energy portfolio, and can we better take advantage of IRA funding? I know you both briefly spoke to that. Do you have anything to add to that question? Starting with Jean-Paul and moving it to Nick.
As I mentioned, I believe that person is correct, and we should allow some of the economics and free market to dictate, which energy source is the most affordable, is the most reliable. And we have a number of options on the table right at our fingertips. And so that person is, I think they're wise beyond their years.
Yeah, I think we did cover a lot of this question through an earlier question in the forum. I think we diversify through clean energy. We create more alternative energy sources to build on top of our legacy as an energy leader and create our energy independence. I mean, if we're not reliant on natural gas as an almost exclusive source of power generation, we'll be less susceptible to rate fluctuations and price fluctuations. And we're just going to create that energy independence and make Louisiana better off for the future. So I think that's how we do that. And we should take advantage of any and all IRA funding that comes to the state, anything the commission would oversee. JP probably does something with the budget of the legislature. I'm not a policy wonk, so he can tell you more about budget. But yeah, we need to take advantage of IRA funds wherever possible for as long as we have them.
We're going to take some questions from in the room. Just one more comment from the Zoom chat. This is in response to whether nuclear is a clean energy. One of our audience members commented, mining operations and refinement make nuclear not renewable or carbon neutral. I feel that's a one important point to raise to folks here. Okay.
Can I add on to that? I just wanted to say that I think what people ask when they say is nuclear clean energy, it depends on how you cut it. If the metric is emissions, it is clean energy. If we're talking about the critical minerals they use to go into the nuclear power creation, then it is not necessarily clean. So I work in HR on all metrics.
All right, folks in the room, starting with Emily.
We have skilled energy workforce. I would argue any state in the world, specifically in Carolina Parish, many of the residents make their living, whether that's oil and gas work or any energy work in general. The future is coming, like you talked about, Nick, with renewable energy. I'll talk about offshore work that may be coming. What in your role as commissioner would you do to help support organizations, say like Fletcher or Delgado, that are helping trying to get our workforce ready for when that day comes? What do you, your role doing?
Ask Emily if you just repeat the last line of your question for the folks in the audience, the Zoom audience. How are you? Whether that's higher learning institutions or even within companies that we already have that are working to help expand and diversify their workforce to be able to keep jobs in Louisiana and keep the people in, I'm going to talk Lafourche and Terrebonne because that's where I live, employed through this transition that'll be coming eventually. What protections and what plans do you have to help with that? Thanks, Emily.
I'll answer with two examples. Number one, Representative Joe Ogeron, who represents Lafourche Parish, is probably the biggest champion for wind production offshore Louisiana. And they've carried several bills over the years trying to ensure that should that day come and the leases are signed and the production becomes a real reality, that we can try to manufacture some of the parts and components right here along the bayou for many reasons. One, for the jobs. Two, for the logistics, so you don't have to bring the wind turbines all over the state highways for Louisiana, which I don't think they're prepared for that either. Of course, so we've got the capacity down here for manufacturing, and I think that's a big issue. It's also on our constitutional amendments this fall is to be able to share in some of the funding for the coastal restoration should that wind production ensue and there's actual revenues from it. And so you'll be voting to see whether or not we can share some of the revenues with the wind energy production for our coastal restoration. And so that'll be a policy choice for each individual person. Obviously, I know that everyone down here believes that coastal restoration is of utmost importance, and I believe that is shared by most of the state of Louisiana, and we'll see that in the vote. Secondly, from the second example, it would be in Iberia Parish, which Lafayette, Greater Lafayette, Acadiana, we've got $1 billion solar farm that, they can't use the solar panels in Iberia Parish, but they can be distributed internationally. And so that is a huge, huge win to bring that manufacturing facility to Acadiana, to Iberia Parish, regardless of whether or not they'll actually be used in that parish or in the state.
To kind of hit on what I said earlier, I know it's been a long hour. We've had a lot of great utility policy here. I work in HR. I create learning and training programs, and my job is to make organizations successful. And my job in this role will be making the PSC and the state of Louisiana as successful as possible. And as I said earlier, I would love to make sure that any investments we have in new energy sources like clean energy, whether that's offshore wind, solar in whatever forms, again, I don't really think that the farm model, in my opinion, works in Louisiana, but rooftop solar, community solar can work here. I want to make sure that's paired with investments in retraining. Like, for example, we're at this critical point where behind the scenes, a lot of power generation, coal-fired, natural gas-fired, is coming up to be retired and rebuilt from Entergy and other utility sources. If we retire those old sources and put renewables in their place, I want to make sure that in the program, in the funding, however we do it, we make sure folks who work there have the opportunity to be retrained, reskilled, and join this adjacent energy industry, because I think that's very important. A lot of those skills are transferable. With offshore wind, we actually make part of wind turbines in Louisiana. It's called the jacket. Now, I'll be honest, I don't 100% know what the jacket is, but I know we make it here in Louisiana, and there is a wind farm up in the Northeast that uses these jackets on all their turbines.
I have a question about the bottleneck that you had put up, the image. And it seems like we know that Louisiana is an energy state, but we're talking about the production of energy. And if you limit yourself geographically, you limit the marketplace for sourcing the energy. So what would be the problem of, and what is the holdup of expanding that bottleneck so that you can actually access the full marketplace of energy production?
I'll turn it to our transmission expert.
Hey y'all, my name is Yvonne Capel-Vickery. I spend most of my time engaging in the MISO stakeholder process, which is a fancy way of saying basically engaging in the regional transmission planning efforts, of which Louisiana is a part. And so that kind of bottleneck that you saw sometimes referred to as the MISO North, MISO South constraint. And really, the understanding that I have of it is that it's linked largely to some contractual agreements that were made. However, there is a very important effort that is currently underway at MISO called the Long Range Transmission Planning Effort. In that effort, there have been regional groups of projects, transmission projects. They have been numbered. So tranche 1, tranche 2, tranche 3, which will focus specifically on the states in the South and expanding our regional backbone grid. And then tranche 4. Tranche 4 is going to be dedicated solely, or not solely, but largely to expanding that constraint that we see. Because there's Elena made some references, there's a lot of very low cost energy that's being produced in the MISO North states that sometimes just sits. They just can't move, and it just can't come down to us when we need it. And so something that I really hope we see from our future commissioner is someone who's really going to champion that transmission process. It's something that is slow moving, yet it is an opportunity for us to have nice things. Sometimes in Louisiana, we feel like it's just so hard for us to get the nice stuff, right? MISO, this long range transmission planning effort, is going to be that. And so really hope that we have a really strong champion at the Public Service Commission to address that constraint.
Here's the question again. Well, would you be a strong champion for, this island to open up the polls?
Well, I'll just say this, and this is just, I think, general and to where you're going. A, the answer is yes. B, MISO is an asset to the state of Louisiana. It's an asset to the United States. We weren't always a part of it. We've become a part of it. And so that was a choice that we made to be a part of it. Whereas some other states have decided not to be a part of their own ISOs. And so I think there's benefits and there could be bigger benefits if we do it right, as she mentioned. So that's something that is the deep dive that most people aren't ever going to hear about when we talk about affordability and getting our lines up and the things that are, back pocketbook type stuff. But I know there's commission members that are already really focused on it, but to have a few more, I think, is what it's going to really take to get the things done.
So if the question is, will I be a champion for transmission? Yes.
What is an energy related policy which you changed your mind on, and what went into that decision?
So for me, it kind of goes into one of my platform pieces, which is bringing back one-to-one net metering, which is where if you generate a kilowatt hour from solar, you should be credited back a kilowatt hour. Right now, energy things are so powerful, they can put a price on the sun and it's only about 30%, which is not fair to people who are invested in that solar. And there's a lot of companies in Louisiana doing great things to drive down the cost of solar so that it can be more accessible, and it's not just for rich people, which can be a criticism of it. So learning more about that exchange rate and seeing how energy is really just price gouging people who choose to make that investment in solar. When I learned more about that, I knew I wanted to bring us back to that one-to-one, that 100% or as close as we can get it credit rate, because then that would mean we could have better opportunities for community solar. We could create community lighthouses, which they do in New Orleans, churches and community centers that put solar panels on their roofs. And then after a storm, the lighthouse turns on, so to speak, and you could go there, get some air conditioning, charge your phone, reconnect with the world. We could do that in South Louisiana, and we'd have the scale and the actual cost effectiveness to do it if we bring back that one-to-one net metering. And the only one who'd be paying for it is energy, not the consumer. So that's my answer on that.
I'm not sure if I've changed my mind on anything, but I think Nick hit the nail on the head, where we've learned so much through this process of the last few years of the power supply issues that we have in the state of Louisiana, and reading the articles about how the different electric utility companies are trying to grapple with that issue, and knowing that some of them are looking to the renewable side of things, and not because of the tax credits, but because of the economics of it. While at the same time, they are recognizing that it's, in some cases, more than 78% of their of their power comes from natural gas. They might have solar that uses 5 to 10% or produces 5 to 10% of their power, and that is a hedge for the pricing. And so the economics of these issues is something that's pretty fascinating to me. And so it's not changed my mind. It's just understanding a little bit more about, you know, the why behind the decisions that are being made for long-term billion-dollar decisions that affect each one of us in our pocketbooks.
A short two-part in a way.
Struggle with two parts.
First question is very easy. What do you consider base load in power generation?
For me, I can tell you, if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. I cannot describe it in engineering terms, but I assume base load is going to be the baseline of what we're delivering to the grid and what we can consistently deliver to the grid under standard operating conditions.
You're asking for a definition or a kilowatt? Like
Just in your own term, what do you consider it?
the sustainable amount of load that the grid is producing.
Are you both aware that MISO had put out a notice that we do have a base load shortfall forecasted? And with that, if I believe I'm correct, I don't know if want to correct me on that one, but I believe MISO did put out a notice we do have a potential base load shortfall. Would that affect your regulatory framework as far as pushing your policies towards your moral policies, such as you want to go to renewable, or does it matter at that point? Do you want more of a solid base load?
Base load shortfall, I think you give a pretty good definition. Basically, it's the base load that we need to power everything, and there's usually a certain margin that we have. Is this thing on? Can you hear me now? Yeah, it's in power. Sorry for those online, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. So essentially, when we are referring to base load, we're referring to the amount of energy we need to maintain standard operations. There's also margin that's included in that, so that in case there's just some kind of unprecedented event, we're covered and our lights can stay on. So when we talk about a shortfall, we're talking about not enough, right? There's a lack. This is something that has been seen throughout markets in the US. There's a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of different reasons for it, because there's different ways to accredit energy on the market. There were some changes that have happened at MISO. If you want to talk about it more, I could talk about it afterwards, but I don't want to take too much more time. So essentially, we're talking about a lack of energy that is credited on the market. So there's varying ways to remedy that issue. And as of yet, we have always been fine, and MISO, as experts in managing things, are pretty good at managing to keep the lights on.
Thanks, Yvonne. I'm gonna bring it back over here. Could you just repeat the question for the candidates?
I guess what I'm getting at, if we got into another shortfall situation, would you be willing to sacrifice some of your, I would say, agenda or your moral positions to establish a base load, a consistent base load, i.e. renewable versus oil and gas?
All right, we'll start with you, Jean Paul, and then we'll move to Nick.
I've been talking about the shortfall pretty often because you recognize that it's been reported that we're going to have a shortfall, but we're also going to have an expansion of businesses, industrial, technology, the data centers that are looking to, move to our state. They're going to take as much energy as a small city, 365, 24/7, forever, for 30 years. And so we're going to have a shortfall. And so when we talk about the nuclear component, sounds like he and I are open to the nuclear options. However, and we do have some nuclear capacity in the state right now, but to be able to deploy new nuclear, even the micro nuclear, is going to take many, many years and a ton of money. And so you might be alluding to, all right, do we postpone the decommissioning of our coal plants? Do we, look at postponing any of the updates that are being forced upon us on our gas-fired plants? And so my answer is, we do need to rely upon our natural resources when we are under a gun as far as trying to reach our energy potential in the short term, while at the same time understanding what the future holds and letting the market figure it out, both from the standpoint of shareholder demands and the EPA demands. So I agree. I don't think we have to give up our stances on anything, but we have to look at reality. And the reality is we're going to be short, and we need a power generation very quickly.
Yeah, we need to keep the lights on. And, to be clear, I'm a fan of clean energy because I want to embrace it, because the future is coming. And I think of, again, that HR perspective, I think of the folks who I want to continue to work in the industry here in Louisiana. And that informs a lot of my decision making too. So, we don't turn off all this legacy energy overnight, a lot of people might. So yeah, we just need to make sure the lights stay on, and we're gonna have to do what we have to do to keep it on, right? Like, I'm not gonna say, as the person on the stage who tends to be more in favor of clean renewable energy, I'm not gonna say I am refusing to light up a coal plant for longer because we need that strength for the grid. No, we have to keep the grid on, absolutely. I'm about adding more diversification to the mix so that we can be prepared for that future. If you think about it, we add a little bit here, a little bit there, we build that knowledge, we build that training, and then suddenly in 5-10 years, we're gonna have a big industry in Louisiana that supports enough jobs.
All right, want to give a big round of applause to our candidates for coming out today. Thank y'all so much. This is Democracy in Action, my favorite activity. So I really appreciate y'all coming and making an effort to just share your ideas so that we know what we're voting on and what things are important to us. This recording of this webinar will go out to everybody, so you will be able to refer back to it. If you have any questions, I did just want to share on our Zoom screen here again. Some of our folks have left, but we have a big group of folks joining us today from across the state. So again, thank y'all for being here, especially to the folks who came to listen to what our potential commissioners have to say. And so we will close now. And if you have any questions, feel free to hang around. We'd be happy to chat with you further. But otherwise, I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your evening. And don't forget to vote on November the 5th. Or early voting or mail-in voting or whatever type of voting you like to do. All right. Thanks, everybody.